Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of The Joy of SharePoint. It is straight up 11 o'clock Central, 12 noon, and I'll let you fill in the blanks for whatever other time zone you may be in. Thanks so much for joining. We'll give it half a second for some other folks. We've still got quite a few people coming in. Super excited that everyone has joined me today. It seems to be a hot topic. Communication options in Office 365. It feels a little overwhelming, and we're going to work through that today and kind of talk about when to use what in the world. So I hope you have a caffeinated beverage of some sort in front of you, maybe even a snack. You can't do SharePoint without caffeine, and you really can't do anything IT related without food. So those are our must-haves. Fat, caffeine, and sugar are the three major food groups associated with information technology. All right, it's looking pretty good. Seems like we are leveling out. Okay, so I believe my screen is being shared, so we'll go from there. Too many options, TMO in O365, hashtag acronyms. So today I want to walk through just our major communication tools that Office 365 presents to us. Because if you're like me, you remember back when we had simpler tools, fewer options. I actually was working with a really sweet lady once that just felt too overwhelmed. And she said, I need you to do me a favor. Take away some of my options. I just want you to tell me the best thing to use to get my job done. That's hard to do because here's my consultant answer for that. It depends. It depends on what you need to do, where you need to do it, who you're communicating and working with. That landscape has expanded drastically in the last few years. So let's kind of talk through it today. Back in the olden days, if you needed to send a communication of any sort to anyone, you went to email. Lotus Notes was the first email system I ever worked with professionally. If any of you guys ever worked with that, shout out. Good old Lotus Notes. If you were feeling fancy as time went on and you had some kind of a chat tool, that might be Skype for Business, Office Communication Service, OCS, for those of us that were around a little longer ago. It was hard to get buy-in. It's still hard to get buy-in sometimes for chat inside of the organization. I think we're coming around to that in greater numbers than ever before, but used to, businesses were really worried that we would be so busy chatting we wouldn't get our work done. And yeah, you can always point a finger at this person or that person, but it's so much easier to get a quick response by sending a quick chat than to wade through a long email thread to make sure we've got the right person copied in. And I know there was an attachment somewhere last week. Where was that? That can be a little difficult. Back in the olden days, our document collaboration, if we ever even used that phrase more than 5 or 6 years ago, but that was pretty much SharePoint. We had some document management tools inside of SharePoint. They're still there today, but SharePoint was where we put our stuff. If we were in an older version of SharePoint, we might have also put our more personal documents in our My Sites, if anybody remembers that. If you had external folks, you needed to get content to them, and your organization only let you email documents under a certain size, then we went to our IT department and had them spin up an FTP site, right? Anybody out there remember the joys of trying to walk external folks through getting into an FTP site? It was a little frustrating, and stuff would just sit out there forever. We probably still got old stuff sitting out there on FTP sites no one's gone to in a really long time, but that's okay. That's a topic for another day. As time goes on, modern times call for modern tools. And Office 365 is that modern tool set. It gives us the ability to collaborate and to work with people, not just inside our organizations, but on the outside too, in ways that we really have never had before. We'll go through some of those capabilities here in a minute, but it's not, we don't just live in email anymore. We don't just live in folders on a file share anymore. If you do, email me later. We can talk about some options. Joy of SharePoint and Pate Group can help with that. There are better tools out there. And it's not just because they're new and shiny. I do have a affinity for things that are new and shiny. I love to play with new stuff. I also get bored easily. So once it's not new and shiny, I have a tendency to go look for something else that's new and shiny. Office 365 gives us value. I'm going to put a poll up. Y'all are being quiet. I know I got some of my usual suspects out there. Feel free to chat in chat should you like. I'm going to launch a poll. Poll is open. What is your current go-to communication tool? Oh, I love watching the numbers change when you guys do polls. Our options are Outlook/email, Skype for Business, Teams, Slack, and standing in people's doorway. You know why we stand in people's doorway? Because we're impatient. That's me. I have been guilty when I worked in a physical office and physically can interact with my coworkers of shooting off that email and then going, hey, did you get that email? I need an answer now. All right, let's give this a few more minutes. So far, I got 54 at Outlook, 10% at Skype, 29 at Teams, 6% at Slack, 2% standing in people's doorway. 87% have voted. I'll give this just another couple of seconds. We've still got some people joining the webinar. Welcome, welcome. Glad you guys could come. All right. Poll is open. Poll is going to close in about 5, 4, 3, 2. I just saw the number go up. Okay, real slow countdown and closing. All right. 56% of us are using Outlook or email as our go-to communication tool. 9%, I'm surprised it's that low. 9% of us are going to Skype for Business. 27% Teams, 5% Slack, 2% standing in people's doorway. Let me advance my slides. Okay, this is a slightly older periodic table of Office 365, but this is just a glimpse into some of the tools that O365 offers for us today. Those of you using Slack, I'm not picking on you, I promise, but there's no time like the present to take a look at why we're using Slack and not one of the tools offered by IT that can give us some security. Teams does have data loss prevention built into it. We can manage the information that's shared possibly with someone outside of our organization in ways that Slack doesn't let us. So I come from a government background, so I'm paranoid. It's good to use the tools that are provided in-house. And I'll put an asterisk and some air quotes in here and say, if we're having these tools provided in-house. I realize some of you may not be. Food for thought. Maybe it's time for a conversation with IT. But Office 365 is a cohesive suite of tools. It doesn't always feel that way though, does it? It doesn't always feel cohesive. And we find ourselves going, okay, if I need to track tasks with a task tracking tool, that's fun. What should I use? Is it to do? Feels kind of lacking in sophistication. I'm always in Outlook. Should I just use my Outlook tasks? Or maybe Planner? You know, there's a Planner web part now for site pages inside of SharePoint. So you can have visibility to Planner in your SharePoint site, on your mobile phone, because there's an app for that, in Planner itself, or in a tab in Teams. I'm not saying you can't do that with the other things as well, but what are we trying to do and who are we doing it with? Document storage and sharing, that's all over the place. SharePoint's the obvious answer for our documents. If we use SharePoint as our intranet, we're probably in there a lot. That's where our stuff goes, and we can use that share button inside of our SharePoint document libraries to open up a little email dialog box and just go ahead and share that content out. OneDrive, I got Teams. I don't need SharePoint. I don't need a site. I just need a place to share files, right? Teams. But when we're using Teams, guess what? We're using OneDrive and we're using SharePoint, whether we know it or not. Outlook. Outlook is great for sharing stuff to people that we don't interact with in SharePoint or Teams, or pick your platform of choice. And I've got a little note here. You can share internally from Outlook, but you really shouldn't, because as soon as you send someone an email attachment inside of your organization, you have just duplicated that document that's probably in SharePoint or should be in SharePoint. Maybe we're not in SharePoint yet. Maybe it's on the file share. You just created 2 copies for every 1 attachment, minimum, when you email data. So stop it. I'm going to gently say knock it off. Stop emailing attachments. It's time to work in a more centralized way. And because of that periodic table of SharePoint, because of all those apps that are out there, it feels like there are way too many options. And we kind of wish anyone could just come and simplify this for us. Do we really need SharePoint and Teams and OneDrive? Really? 3 places for 1 document. Does this make sense? But who are we working with? Where are they? Do you need to just share information? Or do you need to work together on that piece of information? Do you need to talk or chat while you're working on that piece of information? Or are we just sending an attachment and we're done? Rarely is that the case, right? Happens. Let's be clear when we're talking about what Office 365 is and what it isn't, and really what the goal of today is. Today we're talking about our Swiss Army knife. Rarely are we going to have a cookie cutter solution for every scenario we find ourselves in. That doesn't mean we can't have guidance and guidelines. I'm going to use a G word here that we all know and love, governance. You can absolutely set up governance that says when you are sharing data with a client, a vendor, an external person in some way, use Outlook to send that information. Or perhaps you would even say, if you're working with a vendor very closely on a project, perhaps you want to invite them into your environment in some way. That can be your governance. But it's not every time we will always use this one thing, because there are a variety of tools that suit our needs. In our Swiss Army knife example, SharePoint's that really big go-to blade in the Swiss Army knife. This is the one we go to put the majority of our data. But again, I think I mentioned this earlier, we have those groups or those teams. They don't need a site. You ever hear someone say that? I don't really need a site. That's too much. I just need to be able to share stuff with my people. That's Teams, right? It gives that really simple interface to drop a document in, to be able to search for that document, to have a threaded conversation. For those of you that use Slack, Teams has that very similar threaded conversation feature right there. It simplifies it. Us in the IT world who are managing these platforms and these tools and helping our users, yes, we know there's a SharePoint site that's backing that up. That's why it's secure. We know that there are still document management features available out there. Do we have to bombard these people that are a little nervous at the idea of a site with all that information up front? Absolutely not. We can meet them where they are. Give them that really simple place to share files. And then, because we know they will, when they come back and say, okay, we've been using Teams and we really like that these folks outside the organization can drop a file in, but we need to be a way to be able to route that for approval or for review. Aha. That's when SharePoint comes into play, right? That's when you could even just turn on something as simple as content approval, or maybe write a simple flow to get that review, to get that approval, or even an alert just to notify the team via email a new item has been added. You can add on that sophistication as time goes by, but we want to meet people where they are. And that's why there's really not a cookie cutter solution for if A plus B equals C, right? We're working with people. And the whole point of all these options that have been provided to us in Office 365 is that we can use the tool that makes the most sense in a given scenario for a particular need or a particular group of people. I hope that kind of makes sense. If you guys have any questions that are coming to you as you go, you can feel free to put that out in chat. So we're going to break it down now by audience and by the people we're working with. So who are these people? And I'm going to do a shout out to Coach John. If anyone on his team is here, you know who I'm talking about. He kind of uses this to talk about our scenarios and our audiences. Who's my audience? Who am I working with? Is it me, myself, and I, and maybe you? That's OneDrive. One person, an individual, me. But it can also give me the ability to share maybe with you if I want your input on it. I can also send emails. I can send an email to you, or I could send an email to someone outside of my organization. I'll tell you, at Pate Group, we are trying really, really hard to get away from sending emails internally because we just get so many emails. So I put my personal work documentation in OneDrive. Any of you guys ever look at the URL when you're in the web version of OneDrive? Have you ever noticed that it has that little word my? It's a throwback to our My Sites from SharePoint 2010, 2007, right? OneDrive is now kind of your SharePoint My Site, but we can do a whole lot more with it. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But maybe we are working together as a team. Teamwork makes the dream work, right? We chat in teams. We collaborate on documents and we work together on projects, maybe in teams. We use our team sites. We use SharePoint. Now, if we're using Teams, we know we get that SharePoint team site that's kind of protecting and securing and organizing all of that documentation for us. That flows right into your SharePoint architecture by becoming your department or project or your business unit's collaboration site. So teams, collaboration, it all works together. And I've scrunched my next line here in my slide. Both SharePoint and Teams support external users. In Teams, it's called guest access. And you get a little call out under the title of your team. This team has guests. So you could be aware when you're chatting and you're talking and you're sharing that you've got people that are not part of your internal team. You've got a larger audience present. You can choose whether or not they have access into the SharePoint site. You can get super granular here. Maybe you're cool with them chatting and sharing documents, but you don't want them in the SharePoint site being part of flows and calendars and scheduling and task lists and all that fun stuff. Then there's us, all of us collectively, us as in the organization. So Yammer hasn't fallen to the wayside. We don't talk about it quite as much in broader circles, but Yammer is the great place for company broadcasts, shout out, highlights, company news, because one channel isn't enough. You need to have multiple channels of communication. So you can have your company Yammer group that broadcasts out information to the entire organization. You can also put that company public data on our communication sites using the news web parts. Reiterate that corporate information with email. Most of us kind of have a tendency to ignore email that's not specifically for me, but not all of us. Some of us are looking to email to give us that information. We can use these tools to communicate with external folks as well. You can have external folks in your Yammer groups. You can send email to anybody you want to, right? So there are a lot of ways to approach communication and collaboration. but it depends on our audience, and it depends on who we're working with. So let's break this down. Me, myself, and I, maybe you. As a rule, that's going to be OneDrive. This is our content that's not ready to be part of our team site yet. Maybe you're still baking it and you want to get some input from other people. So I may choose to share that with you, but I'm not ready to put it out there for the whole team to see. And my little screenshot there is just a little snippet of some stuff that I've got inside of my OneDrive. And you can see some of these things have been shared and some of these things are private. That means I've not shared it out to anyone. So I have granular permissions present inside of OneDrive. So like Nick, I share a lot of stuff with Nick because I'm working on one document for one thing and it's not ready for prime time yet. Maybe we're working on details for a training engagement. So I'll shoot it to him. What do you think? And he'll go, yeah, this is great, or I don't get it, or maybe you need to work on this. Then once it's ready, we drop it into our team site for that client. So everyone that's working with that client has access to it. And we send an email to the customer, because we don't share our team sites yet with clients by and large. Another thing to think about, OneDrive is the perfect replacement for your desktopper. Do I have any desktop dumpers out there? Shout out in chat if you don't mind telling on yourself. Do you got this file, you need to save it, you need to put it somewhere, I'll just put it on my desktop, then I'll figure it out later. Too busy to organize. Some of us are out there. Let me see, I'll show you something, show you what I've done. Let me see if I can drag this over to my screen. So, OneDrive, Pate Group. You see some stuff I've been working on. See all these folders? This is all my OneDrive stuff. Pictures, that's usually for my webinars and blogs, screenshots, all that fun stuff. If I'm building up a demo, I've just got fake stuff in this demo folder, client notes, archives. I don't dump on my desktop anymore. I squirrel it away in a folder that syncs from OneDrive to my desktop and back. So now if I'm out and about at the dentist office or in an airport, as happens more often than not these days, and someone needs something that I'm still kind of working on, I can just go to my mobile app, share it, done. Love it. Everywhere you go, you can get to your OneDrive content. As long as there's an internet connection and a device, you can get to it. I really stopped dumping on my desktop when my old computer cratered and needed to be replaced. It got to where it had to be rebooted about 6-8 times a day. So yeah, that got me believing in the power of OneDrive. Teamwork. SharePoint and Teams are for our teams. You can break those down a variety of ways. We can sort those by departments. Every department gets a team. And inside the team, they can have channels for organization. Guess what? Private channels are coming sometime this year to Teams. If you wish you could secure a channel, it looks like that's being worked on. Project groups. Pate uses Teams for departments and projects. So we do both of those. Organizational units. That might be those little sub-departments that fall under a greater overarching department space, like operations. You know, you usually have a lot of guys inside of operations and a lot of individual units. So you do it that way. What makes sense for you? But when we are working as a team, we use SharePoint. We use Teams. When we're using Teams, you're using SharePoint. They just go hand in hand. But does this mean that you never, ever, 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 ever email internally? Probably not. It depends. You have that one guy that just refuses to go to Teams. He's not ready yet. Skype for Business doesn't see the point. Chat, that's just for you young kids. So if you need me, send me an email. Okay, maybe we need to meet him or her where they are today. Does your team work better getting a notification on the desktop or a ping on their mobile device or tablet, or with an email? My team works better with that notification because we have so many emails, it's hard to go back and find that last message. But just like anyone in IT, especially any of my consultant colleagues out there will tell you, consistency is key. So if you create that expectation that internal communication will take place in Teams or Skype for Business, not Outlook, then I know when Nick sends me some information, I know to go find it in Teams. I don't have to go, well, did he send it in Skype? Did he send it in Teams? Was that an email? I wonder if that came in through, I don't have to wonder. I know where that information came from. And then there's the corporation, all of us. Outlook, Yammer, SharePoint communication sites. There's even another way of kind of looking through this. I'm going to put a Microsoft slide up on the screen. They like to talk about it in loops. Who's your inner loop? Who's your outer loop? Who do you work with? Notice the center of that is going to be SharePoint. That's where our files and our site content lives. Surrounding that, ways to work with and communicate about that content in SharePoint, that big Swiss Army knife blade. We've got Teams for our inner loop people, the people you work with regularly. Teams is going to be a lot more organic than ways we've worked before because it doesn't really matter what the org chart looks like. Who do you work with day in and day out? I may be in IT, but I work with marketing a lot. I work with sales a lot. So I don't have to work in just those segregated, siloed SharePoint department sites, right? Teams gives us the ability to break that down a little more cleanly. Email whoever you need to talk to. You have ways to get there. That could be internal, that could be external. Yammer is great for your outer loop too. People you connect with across the organization. Now, a topic for another webinar will be the Office 365 groups that kind of encompass the access to all of these various applications inside of Office 365. If you would be interested in a future webinar on Office 365 groups, give me a shout out, let me know. It's something I've been thinking about, just not sure where the public interest lies in that. So cookie cutter solutions rarely work well. Who's your audience? Am I just working on something that's mine? Or is this for my team? Or is this going to be for the organization as a whole? How do your teammates and colleagues work? What works better for them? How do we meet them where they are? Is fast-paced chat better? Hey, Steph, I know you're on the road today, but can you ping me when you get back? I have a question about client X. Or would she rather see that in her email queue? Is it better just to click the call button in Skype for Business or Teams, or if you still have a desk phone? I haven't had a desk phone in a while. I forget they exist. Is it better to pick up that phone and call? Or would a video chat with some remote people be nice so you could actually look each other in the eye when you talk and see body language? What communication tool is going to engage others? If you're in the business of training, change adoption, project management, what's going to engage people? Live events? Team supports live events now. Actually pondering moving this webinar into Teams live events instead of GoToWebinar. More to come. Social platforms, right? Do they love the idea of Twitter? Do they like Yammer? Or email? It's really not the most engaging. So if you're going to go email, make sure you're following that up with maybe quick video snippets. Record those live events, email them out. So if people weren't able to make it, they've got another way to get to it. I'm going to open up the floor to chat. If you guys have any questions, observations, this isn't the longest webinar we've ever done because really I just want to give you ideas, places to start, places to move around. And I see questions here. Let's start going through them. So we've got some interesting groups. Great. Thank you, thank you. The new OneDrive client will let you redirect the desktop folder to OneDrive. Brett, yes, it will. You can absolutely trick your users into using OneDrive, right? I'm down for a little trickery here and there. get them off the desktop, especially if you're one of the folks that's responsible should that desktop machine or laptop die an untimely death. We don't all back up our C drives on our desktops, right? If you get people putting their stuff somewhere that's cloud-based, you eliminate a lot of pain and suffering. This has been helpful. Thank you, Ruth. Glad to see you. I do see some of my usual suspects here today. Interested in groups? Noted. Okay. Well, I guess what my April webinar is going to be about. It's going to be about groups. I'll give you a hint. Think of them as distribution lists on steroids, but we'll dig into that more in April for sure. How's everybody's March Madness bracket doing? Are we happy? Are we sad? Off topic, but I'm curious. Happy, yay. Yes, please, groups. We'll do it. So, let me see. Can I do this on the fly? Just curious, put it in chat if you do. Do you guys, have you started advertising like the Teams mobile app for your users? I'm curious. Will we get a copy of this slide deck? Absolutely. We will make that available. Love the Teams app. Me too. I dual wield. Any gamers out there, you know what that means. I will be on my desktop chatting with someone internally, and then I see somebody else that's pinging me, but I don't want to stop what I'm doing on my desktop, so I go to my mobile app and I start working there. Deploying Teams company-wide this week. Oh, Brent, that's exciting. Not starting Teams yet, just pilot. Awesome. Okay, good information, guys. Diana says they're using it, but they're not sure how many users are. I gotcha. Skype for Business, I tell you. And so this is the chatty portion of the webinar. We're going to keep recording. You never know what little nugget of information you're going to dig out here. If you've ever been frustrated with Skype for Business that you're chatting with someone on the desktop and then you need to get up and go, maybe you're going down the hall, you're running to a meeting, and you go to your Skype for Business mobile app, but you don't have your whole chat history there. That could be a little frustrating, right? The Teams mobile app, it's persistent chat. I can stop where I am in one device, go to another device, and I can go back. I can search the history. It's all right there. It's really clean. Did you know if this Teams mobile app depreciation is true? I have not heard anything about deprecating the Teams mobile app. I will definitely look into that. It is a huge platform, so I can't imagine that's going anywhere. I even take my Teams meetings on my phone sometimes if I need to pace about, because it just works that well. But yeah, Lori, I will do some digging on that, see if I can confirm or deny. Okay. Major change alert, December 2018. Taking notes? Taking notes. She said as she lost her notepad. There it is. I do know if you go to the user voice, there's a lot of information on features that are coming out, and they do have quite a backlog. Read receipts. So my people, my 2% that communicate by standing in people's doorways, something that might make that better for you where you're not having to do that. They are working on releasing read receipts for Teams, both desktop and mobile. I've heard rumors the Android mobile app has it. I don't know if that's true or not. I know the iPhone does not. So that's something that's coming. So that way you don't have to wonder. You'll know. And it's not going to be annoying like read receipts in email. If you ever send me a read receipt in email, I'm going to deny it. It just bugs me. Teams chat, it'll just be seamless. So Amy's saying, just rolled out Office 365. We're working to migrate data from old SharePoint Network drives. Any tips for approaching breakdown of the project, migrating dots from a legacy system? Oh, girl, yes. I spend a lot of time doing this in my day job. So we're all friends here. I can say this freely. Folders are the F word in SharePoint. Don't do them. Stay away from them. If you replicate your folder structure from the file share in SharePoint, you're replicating your file share, which means you're going to replicate pain and suffering. Not to be too blunt. Try to map those subfolders out to libraries. I know, Stephen, yes, channels are folders and teams, but they didn't ask for my opinion when they did that. If it were up to me, those would be libraries, not folders. But here's the good news. What you can do is go create a new view. Do not delete the folders in that library, but go create a new view that's folder free and create views. Even sharing breaks permissions. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. But utilize your views. If you're not super familiar with views inside of SharePoint, views are SharePoint's version of a subfolder. Big difference is you can't break permissions on a view. If you need to break permissions, you really should be going to a library or a site anyway. I also saw Sue Hanley gave the advice for adoption when you start moving people into that Microsoft Teams team site. Change the word or the name of the library documents. You know, it's that document library that's holding all the files that are dumped in Teams. Go into SharePoint, change the library name to files so it matches. Yes, Sue Hanley is the best. Maybe one day she'll come join us on the Joy of SharePoint. Wouldn't that be amazing? Oh my gosh, a girl can dream. But rename that document library to files so that it matches the tab interface inside of Teams. Stephanie and I were talking about this the other day. She was like, holy crap, that won't break anything. So I went to my test team and I did it, and everything works fine. Because remember, when we rename a library in SharePoint, the URL doesn't change. So that's our saving grace. Views are awesome. I'm trying to get users to use custom metadata and fields to sort, group, and by filtering capabilities. Yeah, Stephen, awesome. Also, if you're trying to get people away from folders and trying to get them to adopt views, make your default view of the library grouped by whatever traditionally would have been the subfolders, right? So if it's a category or a department name or a location, group by that column. And that kind of gives them a sort of kind of foldery feel, but it's not folders. We tricked them. It can help. I've seen good success with that. It's hard to get people away from that folder structure because folders have been with us since the beginning of PCs, right? It's just, we have to look at our data new in different ways. Sometimes we have to turn it sideways, but if we can meet our users where they are and give them something that feels familiar, but improving the experience. And the goal is to make the job better day by day, right? Some of our IT colleagues have a hard time swallowing the pill, the fact that we are we're a service industry. We're a service for a corporation. So our job is to make their life better. And there's a lot of ways to do that inside of SharePoint Online, better than we've ever had before. It really is exciting. I'm going to actually put my contact information up here too while we're chatting. I love using SharePoint, but then we have folders in OneDrive. Feels like a mixed message. I agree, Caroline. It does. And that's one of the things where you kind of just look at Microsoft and you go, but why? Why have you taken away my ability to create my views? I think one reason for that, though, to be honest, is because one of the things OneDrive gives us is the ability to share those files with a chosen person or peoples. View wouldn't really let us do that. Folders do. But you know, back in the olden days of my sites, you could have multiple libraries inside of your, and that's what I would do, but we can't do that anymore. Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. And if you hear snoring in the background, that's my big dog. He's one of the dogs of SharePoint. He always joins us on the webinar. He's just not the most active participant. It's all about the moral support. Microsoft has already demoed the same document library experience to be implemented in the files areas of Teams. So that should ease pain when implementing. Yes, metadata is coming to Teams. I can't wait. Metadata is the magic word of SharePoint. It's interesting. Joy of SharePoint was recently on the road last week. And you know, metadata is a scary thing. And it's a kind of a nebulous concept still for a lot of folks. But being able, here's a hint. So Amy, I think you asked the question about kind of helping ease stuff. I'll give you, we usually charge people for this when I do document workshops. Here's a free piece of advice. Hopefully Nick's not listening anymore. When you're talking with people about getting stuff out of the file share, putting it in SharePoint, or maybe an old neglected SharePoint, you really want to enhance that metadata experience. You don't even have to call it that, right? Because then they'll deer in the headlights and you're done. Have them bring in, and maybe even literally print out 3 or 5 pieces of information that they work with the most or are the most critical for that department. And I'll actually have people do this. Flip it over or find a blank margin. And 3 and 5 are magic numbers. Then I'll have them write down 3 or 5 words that describe that piece of paper on the piece of paper. It's very old school, but we're physical people, and doing these physical activities kind of helps it click. So is this a report? Is it for a particular department? Does it have an expiration date? Is it a contract? Right? Those kinds of things, you're defining your columns when you do that. You can even take that information and kind of discern, oh, maybe I need a couple of different libraries for this because, you know, contracts for this client really need to go into a different library than contracts for that client, right? Or if they can all be in the same library, you know, you're defining your views and your columns. So maybe that's helpful. Maybe it's not. Just food for thought. All right, very helpful. Oh, great. You are very welcome. I'm glad I could help. All right, guys, let me think. It is 11:43 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. If you guys still have more questions, observations, please feel free to keep going. If you're starving and you want to have a few minutes to eat, feel free to drop off. Again, thank you for joining Joy of SharePoint. Got my contact info on the screen. New name, same Joy of SharePoint. And guess what? We'll be having an Office 365 Groups webinar in the very near future. Great, thanks Raymond, appreciate you joining. All right, Caroline, thanks. Yeah, I do too. It's my favorite part, is getting to chat with you guys. Thanks, Aurora. Thank you, William. Thank you, Michael. You guys are the great. I'm gonna have a big head after today. No one's gonna be able to deal with me. Sandra, you've been here the whole time. Be safe in your travels. You are sneaky. I swear. You're welcome. Thank you for joining, Mark. Okay, we're down to 18 still on the line. If you guys have any questions, feel free to pop them in chat or the questions, or you can always hit me up at my email if it's something you just want to take offline. That's not a problem at all either. Oh, thanks, Stephen. We will catch you next time. Is there a resource for recommended governance on choosing the different Office 365 tools? That is a very good, very big question. Believe it or not, Microsoft has kind of redesigned their support section on their site. When to use what from AvePoint? You know, that's good. AvePoint does have really good resources, and they've probably updated it with their new web migration tool info too. But what is it, support.docs or something? Heidi, I will do a little bit of Googling around, and I'll have your email address since you registered, and I'll shoot you a couple of links. See, there are some recommendations out there. They're just kind of scattered. Would be great if there were a governance Bible. Oh, that would be a lot of writing. But yeah, I'll see what I can find for you. Yeah, I'm sure you do. It's a big deal. And I'll tell you, I'll be honest, I do a lot of deployment workshops where I go and sit on site with people and talk with 4, 5, 6 small groups from departments. And honestly, the governance comes out of those kinds of conversations. Cookie cutter is really hard these days because of all the tools. But if you just talk with folks and say, hey, when should I use Outlook as opposed to when should I use Teams? You almost need to turn that back around and say, who are you sending emails to? What would your Teams usage look like? And maybe even drop the tool names, drop the technology talk. Say, who do you work with? Are they internal? Are they external? Are they, are you sharing documents or are you working on stuff together? And kind of ask those non-tech questions, but more who, where, what, when, why, how, and then let that lead you to the governance for the scenario. It's a different world, but I will definitely find some info for you and get that out. Stephen, I will take that link if I can copy it and post it to everyone. Send you all. Yep, it is a big landscape these days. All right, guys. Looks like we've settled down. I'm going to go unmute. I'll keep an eye out on questions, though. Everybody have a really fantastic time. Stephen, don't use... Oh, I see. Gotcha. 2016. It's amazing how much life has changed in our world since just 2016.